The episode kicks things off by announcing that they're here to conduct a complicated survey mission. So that means one of two things. Either there will be some kind of strange anomaly here, or there will be some kind of shipboard drama to which the survey is a backdrop. That's not a criticism. Watching people make surveys for 45 minutes would hardly make for interesting television, so I applaud their decision to show that the explorers are occasionally exploring things rather than just playing taxi. As you can see, Riker drags his sorry ass out of bed and realizes that, even though he's exhausted, he's still overslept and is late for a meeting with Geordi. And if he wasn't tired enough already, the yawn-inducing topic is sensor efficiency, the Starship equivalent of an SEO meeting. Geordi suggests that, since spaceships run on Tim Allen technology, all they have to do is channel more power into the dish, and it will be able to scan the whole system much faster. We're all about saving time here, after all. It leaves more time for Data's poetry reading.
Then we sat on the sand for some time and observed how the oceans that cover the world were perturbed by the tides from the orbiting moon overhead. How relaxing the sound of the waves is, you said.
I take back my comment. This is even worse than an SEO meeting. Data's Ode to Spot, though, is a classic, and as an aside, this once again shows Braga in his element, creating poetry that meets virtually flawless technical criteria while being terrible. It's like a Vulcan that was raised by Vogons. But this is meant to be an X-Files version of Star Trek, which means that this is the calm before the storm stuff here, dropping the breadcrumbs that will soon form a trail leading to a real mystery. This is the beginning of an exciting journey.
The state of your emotion.
Well, for the audience anyway. After the titles, he goes to see Dr. Crusher about his exhaustion. He has no trouble falling asleep, and he isn't restless, and yet he wakes up exhausted every day, with no explanation. She gives him a recipe for warm milk and tells him to get lost. She has actual sick people to see, after all. Down in engineering, Data and Geordi discuss his poetry, but it's interrupted by a warning light about them overclocking their sensor array. There's been an explosion in one of the cargo bays, and 3 people are inside. People in desperate need of help right away! And it seems people that Worf owes money. We've got to hurry. Now. Running in the halls is a serious safety violation. Slow and steady wins the race, Doctor. After Usain Bolt finally gets them there and they get inside, they discover that there is no emergency. Everything is just fine. The place seems its normal, unsafe self. Geordi figures it must be some sensor glitch, so he and Riker will take care of that in the morning. And Riker asks for a wake-up call to make sure he doesn't oversleep this time. He crawls into bed, and almost immediately the door chimes. It's Geordi. It's now morning. The entire night was about 30 seconds long, and not in the living near the Arctic Circle kind of way. Naturally, there's only one explanation for this distortion of the space-time continuum: warm milk. With Riker coping with that problem, Worf is dealing with his own, a trip to Mott the barber. During the haircut, Worf has a reaction, which is not unusual for most people who have to deal with Mott for a long period of time. But in this case, it's the presence of the scissors themselves that sets him off. Of course, he used to have the same reaction to soap, and he finally got over that, so give it time. Anyway, in the cargo bay, everything looks fine, so they decide to take the sensor array offline for right now. A discussion so exciting that even Geordi is yawning. Not long after, he has a problem with his visor and decides to head to sickbay, where they discover there's this strange bacterial buildup around his visor inputs, with no explanation. I mean, he doesn't rub his head with raw chicken, not anymore. He's got a new hobby now. But this requires a long and drawn-out medical procedure to deal with, and yet, when he returns, Data acts as if he had just left. His internal chronometer is missing over an hour.
You know, first we picked up a false EPS explosion, then my visor cuts out twice, and now you lose an hour all in this cargo bay.
Perhaps it is haunted. No, we're saving the haunting for the really bad episode. They're going to investigate this, but in the meantime, Riker is getting the same weird feeling that Worf had, a sense of extreme anxiety coming from the con panel. Although Wesley sat there for years, so it's possible he got his dweeb funk all over it. Back in the cargo bay, they pick up a subspace particle emission, and sure enough, there's a portal of the damned up there. That's great. Now we're going to have to get a hold of a contractor to fix that. And they charge you through the nose just if you've got lead paint around. Imagine their look on their faces when they tell them that you've got...
It appears to be composed of spatially inverted tetryon particles. We believe they are emanating from a tertiary subspace manifold.
Yeah, one of those. Tell them you've got one of those in your walls, and the only way you're going to see any money out of that house is if it accidentally burns down. Geordi says there's nothing to really worry about in this case, though. It's more of a puzzler than anything else. If it winds up posing any kind of threat, they could always beam the bulkhead out into space and erect a force field until they built a new one. While they think about that little nugget of weird, Riker's telling Troy about what happened with the console.
You're the third person who's come to me today with something like this.
And frankly, I'm sick of it. Troy, as Riker and 3 other people who have had similar experiences get together to discuss what happened, which I think is the closest to actual competence we've seen from her in a long time. The other 3 are Worf, Geordi, and Woman Number 2. A nice touch, actually. We had seen her during Data's poetry reading, and it had seemed like she was just another extra. Having her now active, even in a small role with this, helps add to the sense that the ship is as big as we're told. When things keep happening to the same 7 people, you tend to lose that feeling. If anything, I think that Geordi in this scene should have been replaced with Keiko or Ogawa, someone familiar but not a main character. Everyone can offer up a couple of small bits, but that's all. So Riker suggests they all head to the holodeck to see if that can help. To reconstruct the experience, I mean. I don't think that Vulcan Love Slave is going to help solve this problem. Step by step, they reconstruct their memory of a table until they get to this point. It probably seemed like a bit of a jump from the wooden one to the metal one, but this does make sense. When they went from a flat table to an angled one, it didn't just tilt the tabletop, it provided a whole new style of table that had a tilted top to it. So it's probably calling up one of its thousands of tables that closest fits what is being described. They keep adding to the table bit by bit, and then the sounds coming from the darkness all around them are added.
More of them.
Even in the 24th century, this right here will cure your constipation. Given this new evidence, they're sent off to sickbay for a checkup, revealing that they've been exposed to some kind of particles that are being released in the cargo bay. What's more, Data reveals that he left the ship for an hour and a half during that time that Geordi was in sickbay.
Are you sure? Whenever I am on the ship, the warp field leaves an electromagnetic signal on my internal servo fluid system.
Sometimes I wonder if Spiner got paid by the technobabble. Then I realized that if he did, he would probably own 2/3 of the Earth's habitable surface by now.
Computer, are there any members of the crew of the Enterprise missing?
There are 2 crew members unaccounted for.
Seriously? Wow, Brago overcompensates. Here, the computer won't bother checking to see if anybody is missing unless asked. Then in cathexis on Voyager, it's constantly recording the brainwave patterns of the crew. It's hard to tell which is worse, actually. Voyager would make Big Brother in 1984 grab a pen and take notes, but the Enterprise, it's like letting your kid play by himself at a windowless van convention. During the examinations, they discover that Riker's arm was cut off and then reattached. They determined this because there is a 0.02 micron misalignment. If you're curious, 0.02 microns is approximately the width of a ribosome, which I can't help but think should probably fall on the margin of error for any scan, but in truth, I just find it hilarious that on the one hand, the ship has such precision that it's the equivalent of knowing you're on the wrong planet because there's a grain of sand missing, and yet it's also capable of losing an entire person. Not many people know this, but most human beings are larger than a micron. Things are getting more and more serious. Some kind of portal appears to be opening in the cargo bay now, and when one of the missing people returns, his blood is all messed up. We'll find out later that he dies from this, from what Dr. Crusher describes as, well, it sounds like it turned into jelly or something. The beam the bulkhead away plan is not going to work anymore because, and I know you're going to have a hard time believing this, but I swear it is the truth, technobabble. The only solution now is to disrupt this process at the source, but they have no way of knowing where the source is. Worf suggests some kind of homing device, and Riker volunteers to use it, on the grounds that they've been taking him more than anybody else, and it's not as if they have a choice in the matter. To give him a fighting chance, they're going to inject him with drugs so that he doesn't fall asleep when he's taken. No doubt the same thing that had been given to the crowd for Data's poetry reading. So, sure enough, a portal opens and sucks him in, and he's in the domain of the aliens. They scan him like crazy, clicking away at each other as they go. In order to give them a natural cadence, the staff created a language of actual words so that it wasn't just random noises. So technically they're saying something. Probably something evil, although you never know. This could all just be in a day's work for them. Don't hover over me. You're always hovering over me. If you weren't such a screw-up, I wouldn't have to. It's because you're always hovering over me. I can't think with you standing there. Stop it. Look, do I have to remind you that Command asked you for a simple skin sample? I sneezed. It happened. I'm sorry. Sorry? You cut the guy's arm off. And I put it back on. Yeah, backwards. If I hadn't fixed it, need I remind you? You mixed up the order of my vials. Oh, no. Won't you put that one on me? The blood thickener was clearly labeled. I have a system. I told you I have a system. Don't touch my stuff. It's not your stuff. I didn't see it labeled property of dumbass. All I'm saying is there wouldn't have been a problem if you had stayed away from my workstation. Hovering over me. There would not have been a problem if you'd been paying proper attention to what you were doing. And if you hadn't freaked out when you realized that you did it, and then you tossed it back through the portal. What did you think? No one was going to notice? Did you think someone might comment, hey, the subject is missing. The last readings indicate he was dying right before a portal opened. Well, that's an unsolvable mystery. Time for lunch, I guess. Just shut your noise hole. God only knows what they must think of us now. I was supposed to lead the first contact team into their universe once we figured out how we could survive there. Now they probably think we're all monsters or something. And it's thanks to you. Yeah? I thought this was all about medical ethics, huh? But no, it's always about you, isn't it? And stop hovering over me! Well, whatever might be going on here, the situation is getting serious back on the Enterprise. So finally Picard has no choice but to activate the graviton pulse that will seal off the rift. The aliens begin scrambling and try to stop them, so Riker leaps into action, grabbing the ensign from the other table so that they can get out of here. On behalf of... God, my foot! He shot my foot! What kind of asshole shoots a doctor in the foot? I bet he would have missed if you hadn't fixed his arm. Now? You want to do this now? So Riker and the ensign escape, and Picard can give a captain's log.
The Tetrion emissions in Cargo Bay 4 have ceased, and there have been no further indications of alien intrusions. All Enterprise crew members are safe and accounted for.
What about the dead guy? Everyone who is not an extra is safe and accounted for. Post-episode follow-up, annoying character goes to woman number 2, but just because of her hair. Man, is that ugly. Final score for Schism is 6 out of 10. It's definitely an above-average story, even by TNG standards. And their twist on the alien abduction idea is great. What harms it, though, is that the episode doesn't fully capture the terrifying aspect of this outside of the holodeck scene. Don't get me wrong, that was very effective, and structuring this as a mystery was definitely the right way to do it. However, once the holodeck scene came and went, the atmosphere went back to normal again. There was no sense of tension created, and the death of that abductee was actually less horrific than other deaths on the show that were made, and when no malice was involved, such as the officer that sunk waist deep into the floor back in Theory. The realm of the aliens itself was also just the same old. Replace them with Romulans and it would have been just as natural. And the familiar isn't going to be scary, which is what this episode, I believe, was trying to do by going with the alien abduction plot in this way. The script mostly delivers. The mystery slowly emerging from the day-to-day events was good. But Act 4 needed some revisions in the script, and Act 5 needed to deliver a much better alien realm, as well as aliens themselves. We should have had the sense that Riker and the ensign were in a small island of light amidst an unknowable darkness, with the mysterious aliens being largely unseen, rather than clearly showing us their faces. I mention this because there were thoughts as work was being done that these could be a new threat, And mystery was the greatest strength of this episode. Banking on the mysterious as well as the literal otherworldliness of this realm would have made that possible. One thing that helped make everyone clamor for the Borg was the sight of that cube relentlessly chasing down the Enterprise even as it was repairing itself. That said in no uncertain terms, this is something we cannot cope with. Having the aliens go unseen, except perhaps to Riker for one brief shot where we see on his face as he can see theirs and see how much more afraid he gets at the sight of it, would have achieved the same kind of thing. Schisms is a success and a failure in that regard. It's a good episode, but it could have been a landmark episode. I told you to stop hovering over me!